I've been grinding away at this game for what seems like forever, but I've been having a great time doing it. This is a CFM review of Final Fantasy 16.
Yes.
So, it's been no secret that I picked this up at launch. I've been smashing my head up against this wall for what seems like forever. Final clock in time, 42 hours. So, funny enough, around the same time as Pikmin. I shouldn't say that. I haven't. My little brother's playing some Bloodborne right now, so like it's one of those things where I'm gonna just. I'm pretty sure it was more than Pikmin. So let's say 45. It was a pretty long game, but I will say, very fun. In spite of what people may say, in spite of the smash square to wins, you know, what's a combo system? Not a real Final Fantasy. Despite all of those complaints, I'm actually in the camp that says this is a great Final Fantasy game. Easily the best written Final Fantasy game in God since 10.
Yeah.
Like, it's very... you know what? I'll be generous. As far as, like, core plot writing, it's about as solid as 12. And, you know, funny enough, it kind of hits all those same beats, too, where, you know, great beginning, great middle, then the end's coming around. It's kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is how we're resolving this. All right. Regardless, though, solid story, great characters. Like, that's really what drives the heart and soul of Final Fantasy 16 are the characters. Clive, Jill, Sid, Gav, everybody, Otto, everybody at the hideaway is memorable. All the royals and nobles are memorable. All of the character work in Final Fantasy 16 is fantastic. As is the capturing of the I want to say traditional and authentic Final Fantasy flavor. You got your Marlboros, you got your goblins, you got your different classes on display: dragoons, knights, paladins, thieves, all of these kinds of classic, whatever you expect to see in a Final Fantasy game, it's in this game. And it's cool to see it in this way. The action combat is engaging. Again, I like to think about the game's combat as you get in what you get out, what you put in. You can choose to do the mash square and win, and that works. But you can also decide to really push the combos and really try to get a high damage, because the more cohesive your combo that you do in the stagger state that you put an enemy in, and recognizing the different windows of opportunity that you have with your different abilities, like the Garuda, when you stun an enemy not his penultimate stun form where it's like a burn phase in Final Fantasy XIV, but like the middle of that meter, you see it here in the B-roll, this character has a life bar and a meter underneath him. At the midpoint, if you have Garuda, he actually does a mini stun, and you can use Garuda's power of pulling an enemy towards you. It won't pull him towards you because he's a bigger enemy normally, but if you hit him in that stun window, you like grab him by the face and pull him down to his knees. And it gives you another opening. And then you can push the stagger bar. That's what that little yellow bar is. You can push the stagger bar even further into the next true stagger form and just get him there and push your damage. So if you really do learn the cues, you really do learn how to maximize the windows of opportunities that you get, you're just really, these enemies, even big dragon types enemies, even enemies, storyline type enemies, they feel powerless against you.
That's good. Nice, worthwhile grind. Rewarding anyway.
Well, that's the best part about it, is that there is no grind. You just kind of pick up these abilities, and the grind kind of is there, but every icon ability. Yeah, exactly. It's more in the execution, because every icon ability, yeah, there's unlockable ones that you can get with your skill points that you get by leveling up and stuff like that. But they're pretty much all given to you up front. And so the game really doesn't feel that, and this is where your mileage is going to vary with Final Fantasy XVI. It definitely was my test. Honestly, as a Final Fantasy diehard, and as someone who really loves the series for what it is, really loves, I love Final Fantasy 15 for the fact that it really tried to preserve that turn-based menu shuffle while going through the action combat like Kingdom Hearts. I mean, you just can't do it better than Kingdom Hearts, unfortunately. But it really tried, and I really like that it tried to respect that. This game doesn't respect that. This game says this is an action game. Sorry.
Oops. All action.
Oops, all combos. Like, and I loved it. I ended up loving it. Because you have, like, in the B-roll right here up against this storyline boss, you have these moments, these quick time event moments that spice up the action in the boss fight, because you get the quick time events, and they are classic God of War style quick time events, but mixed in. This is the part that mixes in with the Final Fantasy drama really well. It makes the drama feel interactive, and these quick time events don't feel cheesy like they do in maybe a title like God of War 3 or other games like Bayonetta 2 that just shove quick time events down your throat, right? You got a quick time event you can't rest in your cutscene because you gotta be you gotta be smashing a button.
The feeling. Yeah, something's gonna happen.
You better be paying attention. Like, you better be ready.
Put that color down thing in your safe and cutscene.
Yeah, nah. Like, the best part about this game is that those quick time events, the cutscenes and the storyline moments feel good enough, and the presentation is solid enough to where you feel like these moments are you, and it's you getting your hit in. Like, the game is giving me my chance to get my hit in on this boss in the same. So, like, Clive is a badass, boom, 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 boom. But now I'm gonna press R1 and I'm gonna get wham, my big hit in, wham, because these big hits normally aren't the big climactic hits. They're like the setup that stuns the villain for Clive to go in and land his big smash hit, which is awesome, and it feels great, and it ends up feeling like Clive is the badass, and you are controlling Clive, so therefore you are the badass. And I feel like that is the idea that Yoshi P wanted to convey when he said that this is a game with the soul of a PS2 game.
Wow.
Like, I'm the character, right? I might control the character, and I might be like the one who is executing the cool moves in the moment for the long stretches of the boss fight. But Clive is awesome.
Yeah.
And he is undeniably a badass. And like
cool hair protagonist.
Yeah, like actually way more subtle anime hair than most much more reserved anime hair. Like
more Game of Thrones hair.
Yes, exactly. So, speaking of Game of Thrones, if you love Game of Thrones, you're probably going to love this. You're going to love Final Fantasy 16. They say that Yoshi P made his whole team watch Game of Thrones. It really shows.
Wow.
There's a lot of that inspiration there. It's very palpable. But again, okay, so here's where my main criticisms come in. My main criticisms come in with the less than elegant departures that Final Fantasy XVI embraces. Because, make no mistake, this game is a genre departure, a whole hog. There is no messing with menus. There is no shuffling through any of that at all. There's not even really any party members. Your party members are very fluid. Like you have your dog Torgal, and that's your mainstay, and he's there all the time, and he's a badass, and he's your buddy, best boy. But for the most part, even like the characters that you think are permanent aren't very permanent, and they get changed out again. Much like Kingdom Hearts style, like, all right, so I've got Goofy and Donald, and one of those guys is going to be my mainstay, and I'm going to switch one of them out for Jack Skellington, or Jack Sparrow, or Tron, or, someone else is going to come with me on this adventure that my context-sensitive teammate is going to be here with me, and he's going to assist me on this part of the story, because it makes sense, right? It makes sense that he's here, and that's all well and good, but it makes it so the RPG like there is no stat crunching in this game, really. Like there is no stat crunching. Your two main stats that you get from gear are like rudimentary stats that are essentially no duh stats. Like you're never gonna have a moment where you're looking at two swords and you're like, fuck, I really think that this sword is better than this one. But if I'm honest with myself, the way I play leans more into this piece of gear. That doesn't happen in Final Fantasy 16. This gear is just better. You're stupid for not having it. Like, if you don't want it, then you just don't want the numbers boost, because I don't know why. Furthermore, the easy mode of the game, and here's a controversial decision, or I guess you could call it an interpretation of mine, but I think it's the intent of the developer. The easy mode of the game is actually in the gear. So there are pieces of gear that allow you to automatically dodge, and not just dodge like haphazard, like it's a perfect dodge. Like Clive just perfect dodges everything.
Wow,
automatically.
like random chance somewhat.
Yeah. Like he just dodges.
Random crits are balanced, yes.
Yeah, like no, it's not random crits. You just get crits. It's crits for you. Crits are us. Like,
come on down and get your crits.
Come on down and get your perfect dodges that you don't need to execute at all. So you have that. You have a ring that automatically uses certain special abilities for you, and you have a ring that automatically executes the highest damage possible combo that you have. So like,
wow.
Yeah,
instead of that Final Fantasy 12, like you can program your battles a little bit,
right? So okay. So you understand that we've been here before.
Yeah, a little bit.
You understand that this is nothing new, really. like when you're sitting here and you're confronted with this, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Didn't we do that one time?
Like we've done this before, and but I will concede that it is very jarring to realize that we are. It's very jarring to realize that this is an action game where there are things like perfect frames and. Best example I can give of a frame perfect maneuver that you, the player, need to have a good grasp of combat to execute is a parry. So to do a parry in Final Fantasy 16, you need to hit your opponent. You need to hit your opponent's attack. Oh yeah,
so, that's a parry and not a block,
right? Somewhat. So that essentially gives you like a big slow motion moment where like the world is slow-mo, but Clive isn't. And it's one of the most rewarding maneuvers you can do. I don't think there's a ring. If there is, I never found it, or I didn't care to use it. I never used any of these rings because I'll get to a why in a second. But like honestly, there are maneuvers in this game that are super rewarding, like the parry, certain moves, like the moves that I'm doing right now in the B-roll with the thunder attacks, like those moves where you do need to charge and you might not want to use the whole charge. You might want to put some charges on some enemy, some charges on another enemy. So you can play the game and let the game play itself, right? And in an action game Devil May Cry setting, it is really weird, like, to play a game like that just kind of like wow, it's Devil May Cry, but it's like a mobile game.
Yeah, but like I don't necessarily have to. I can just kind of hold down the autopilot.
Yeah, and it's a very jarring experience for sure. But again, I'm gonna go back to like what you said. We've been like Final Fantasy 12, like what I said, we've been here before. Like, this is nothing new for Final Fantasy as a franchise. This is just, I just don't think people have really seen the seen the presentation in this type of gameplay style. And it's a very, very jarring thing. But if that's how you're going to play, that's how you're going to play. And I personally believe that, because in the beginning of the game, you do pick action or story. Those are your difficulties. Action or story.
Okay, yeah.
So, like, I do believe that maybe story should have just been, like, that should have been how you play story mode. Instead of, like, here's some rings. Because I'm going to tell you, Drix, there's some gear that you get in this game that's fucking awesome. It's like, all right, we're going to cut this one cooldown of this badass move. Like you've seen me do it in this B-roll. It's like a big flaming explosion. Like, we're going to cut down the cooldown of this by like 25%. So
yeah, more big fire moves.
Yeah, more big fire moves. Where the next we're gonna augment this charm augments the damage of this giant charge punch move that you get later on by like 15%, 20%. So if you don't do autopilot gear, you're dishing out tons of damage.
Yeah, big numbers.
Big numbers. But unfortunately, that's where the RPG ends. The RPG ends at big numbers. Big numbers go bigger. Big numbers make stagger happen faster. It ends there. Crafting is not unique. It actually kind of feels like if you missed a big crafting epic or legendary item, you kind of fucked up and didn't. Like you missed a really obvious thing, or like you fucked up and beat a boss the wrong way. Like you messed up if you missed one of these good crafting items. Like there's no real exploration. It's very much like Final Fantasy 13.
7.
Like Final Fantasy 13.
I feel like you'd walk past materia or certain items.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there goes their ultimate weapon or whatever.
Yeah, like it's very, very one note. The world itself is like very closed off. It's very classic Final Fantasy in that way. Like think back to like Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IV, where like you have the world map, but you're only going to specific places, and some of those specific places link to other specific places. But it's very, at the end of the day, very small. I wish you could have explored more. Whatever you might think of the storyline and how cool the characters are, the juxtaposition of hard-boiled medieval political intrigue of Game of Thrones style imperial power and what it takes to grab that power, the juxtaposition that has with giant kaiju battles just kind of makes it's just not a very, it doesn't create, they're both awesome, but when you combine them, it feel inherently disjointed. Whenever I'm looking at one, I feel like I'm waiting for another, and it's never clear what points those are. There were some times where I was playing through the end of a kaiju battle and I'm like, fuck, what the fuck are the implications of this kaiju battle? And then there are times when I'm sitting here listening to this political intrigue and I'm going to be like, is the next kaiju battle I'm going to have against this guy? Like, you know, like,
is the icon just about to erupt and start wrecking house right now?
That's exactly
in the
how
middle
it
of this
is.
conversation.
In the middle of the conversation, like what's actually happening? And there are times where the game comes dangerously close to the levels of ridiculousness that we fear, but it never jumps whole hog into it, which I'm glad about. I'm very glad that it doesn't happen that way. But honestly, Final Fantasy 16, it's gonna be a game that I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, straight up. Graphics are amazing, combat's great. You could play combat in a lot of different ways. I'll say it like that. The soundtrack is incredible. The characters are amazing. The plot is the best written plot Final Fantasy has had in a very, very long time. It falls apart, but it doesn't fall apart until the very end. And there's just so many things to love that juxtapose with the bad things, where it's like it's not a very open world. There are a couple of mechanics in the game that do ultimately feel meaningless in the grand scope of the game and what you're actually doing when you're sitting down and playing the game. You kind of get these mechanics, like unfortunately your chocobo is one of these mechanics where you're sitting down and you're like, why the fuck do I even have this at the end of the day? The world is so fucking small. I don't even need this shit. And it sucks because
novelty.
It's a chocobo. Yeah, exactly. It's a novelty chocobo. So like,
I want to ride them around and collect artifacts and stuff.
Yeah, right? Like, so there's that.
At least raise them.
And that's, right, you don't even get to raise them. Like,
not the game for mini games.
Yeah, no, definitely not the game. Well, sort of, kind of, but very different style of mini games. It's a very different Final Fantasy game. I love it. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy, I suggest you check it out. If you're not a fan of action games, but you're a fan of Final Fantasy games, I suggest you wait until it's on sale. But it's one of those games where I feel like the spectacle alone will sell you, just because the moments that it gives you are so priceless and engrossing.
Like a good VFX film.
Yeah, very much so. But that's Final Fantasy 16, our 4 out of 5 CFM Radio.